President Trump has denounced Europe as a decaying group of nations presided over by weak leaders. He says they failed to control migration and warns the continent faces civilizational erasure. So, why is he saying all this now? And is the US no longer an ally Europe can rely on? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, the US President Donald Trump has blasted Europe's leaders for what he calls their weak and woke ways, saying they don't know what to do. His latest criticism of Europe has laid bare his administration's anger over everything from migration to the war in Ukraine. And he's even called for 4 countries to leave the European Union. It comes as America's new national security strategy embraces a multipolar world, breaking from the liberal order.
The Trump administration's drastic changes to U.S. national security strategy and its very role in the world.
One that enshrines his America First campaign approach into U.S. policy.
It overturns 70 years of U.S. foreign policy.
The U.S. president has said Europe is a, quote, decaying group of nations led by, quote, weak people.
It's the document hailed as revolutionary by supporters and devastating by its critics.
I want to run the United States. I don't want to run Europe.
In the new security strategy, Russia is no longer referred to as an aggressive, acute threat, instead a potential partner with which Europe has been told to manage its relations. Something that's gone down well with the Kremlin.
The adjustments that we see correspond in many ways to our vision.
Europe, in contrast, is portrayed as a civilization backsliding on democratic principles and erasing its civilization due to mass migration.
Europe is being destroyed.
The document promises the US will cultivate resistance to this, openly backing nationalist movements across the continent. But most significant is the explicit embrace of a realist, multipolar worldview, something pushed for years now by Russia, China, BRICS, Turkey, and now America. Washington now officially rejects wanting to be the global hegemon, instead favouring, quote, regional balances of power. The clear loser in this new formula is Europe.
We in Europe and in Germany must become much more independent from the US. Now it has been confirmed once again. It has been documented. This is the new American strategy, and of course, America First is particularly evident here.
This updated security strategy is a realist shift in how the US now sees the world, and in turn, Europe now faces a tricky balancing act of its own, with its future dependent on the path it chooses to take.
Well, let's bring in our guests. In Washington, D.C., we have the political strategist Rina Shah. In Strasbourg, we're joined by the Hungarian MEP Andras Laszlo. And in Brussels, we have Philipp Lausberg, who's an analyst at the European Policy Centre. And I'm delighted to say here with me in the studio, we have Deputy Editor of the Spectator magazine, Freddy Gray. Freddy, to you, first of all, for people who care passionately about Europe, these Trump comments were very disrespectful, weren't they?
Well, I think there's a lot of hurt in Brussels and other European capitals, not just about the statements Trump makes. People have got used to those over the years. There's more deep concern now about a profound shift in US strategy when it comes to Europe. And that America is essentially saying, Europe, you are dying. We're going to accommodate with the new world, which is China, which is Russia, which is India, and which is Japan. So I think there is deep concern and hurt about that in Europe. However, they're not really listening to the key messages of the national security strategy, which was laid out in recent days by the Trump administration. And the Trump administration is saying, no, we are worried about Europe, but we want to work with you, we want to help you. So there's a bit of things are getting lost in translation. And I think this happens a lot with Trump and Trump world, is this sort of allergic reaction to announcements or things from European leaders, and they're not really thinking about what the Trump administration is trying to say.
So you think this is almost tough love from Trump?
I think it's tough love from Trump. I think there is a lot of concern about free speech in Washington. That is a major part of their foreign policy platform. Europeans will say this is all to do with Trump being owned by tech giants and so on, and there may be some truth to that. But there is also a sincere concern that if there is to be a free world, free speech is a very important part of it. And if America is going to be a leader of the free world, then it needs to protect free speech. And we see in Europe that's not happening.
Thanks, Freddie. Rina, to you, what's your view on why Trump is saying all of this now?
I believe that the president is certainly irritated with how little he's been able to get done on the world stage. And I hear that echoed in the halls of Congress quite a bit from Republican members of Congress. What they're dealing with right now are fissures in the MAGA coalition that are coming to the surface. That's another frustration for the president because he finds that embarrassing. This is a president that demands full loyalty. So if it's not happening internally, he's also going to look externally. And I believe by blaming Europe, by, again, criticizing, attacking European leaders, he's trying to really make himself look good. Like the strong leader he always tries to project, he believes that holding other leaders accountable is a good strategy to make him look stronger, again, at home. This is about domestic optics, make no mistake. He ran and campaigned and won on really selling to the American people that he would renew the focus on domestic issues by telling the world that we were no longer going to be the world's bank, the world's police, or come to their defense when they were not doing their equal share. So by blaming Europe, he's leaning right back into that strategy we saw a year ago.
Philipp, to you in Brussels, how were these comments received then in the European Union's corridors?
I think it was a mix of shock and disbelief. Some people had still hoped that Trump wouldn't be as bad as some have expected, but I think the worst expectations are being met now. I think it's a mix of also defiance, because I think when Trump talks about civilizational erasure or decay, I think there's a lot of voices that point at the United States being not exactly in best shape either, looking at societal division, looking at their drug epidemic, looking at the economic state as also not going that well. Plus, of course, the inequality, where Europe is actually scoring much better. I think Europe has also reacted in a way that a lot of people are aware that there is a kernel of truth in what Trump says. The leaders haven't been very decisive. There has been disagreements. There hasn't been a quick action in important policy files, and I think there is also a willingness among some to change that. And I think at least there's an awareness that there has to be more common action among some commentators, and that there has to be more cooperation and pooling European strengths going forward to then disprove Trump, basically.
Andras, your leader, Viktor Orban, is the closest probably in Europe to Trump. We know there is great admiration from this Trump administration towards Orban and Hungary. How were those comments received then in Budapest?
There wasn't a lot of attention about it, but it is true that a lot of the things this new security strategy says and what the Trump administration has been communicating towards Europe and about Europe is a lot of inconvenient truth to the liberal progressive ears in most of Europe. Obviously, we've been saying the same criticism about the situation of Europe. We've been sharing this criticism from Hungary and with a broad alliance of patriots all across Europe, that things are not going well in Europe. They're not going well civilizationally. They're not going well economically. And Europe is losing its weight in global politics. And it's just inconvenient for elites in Brussels and the mainstream in Europe, which has, of course, a lot of responsibility in the dire situation in Europe today. So obviously, they don't want to hear this criticism, although we have seen the same thing. We have heard the same thing from J.D. Vance, vice president, last year at the Munich Security Conference, etc. So I think it's the new security strategy is exactly a continuation of what we've been hearing on behalf of the Trump administration since many, many months now.
And Andras, Trump gave an interview subsequently wailing against Europe's weak leaders, describing them as woke, saying Europe doesn't know what it wants to do. Who do you think he was talking about there primarily? Which countries?
I think he was talking about the European Union as a whole. I mean, if you look at the leadership in the European Commission, but also if you look at some of the leaders in France, in Germany, they've never been so unpopular. They have never been so weak, and they're just incapable of changing direction, of taking Europe back to the right path, towards growth, towards peace, towards prosperity. And of course, there's a lot of frustration with this, as I said, in Europe too. These are problems we need to fix. It's of course first and foremost our interest that we fix Europe, and it's our interest that we put Europe back on the right track. And all of this to us is just the truth, which of course has not been the policy of the Biden administration.
Thanks, Andras. Freddy, just come in on what he was saying there about the strategy and everything Trump has been saying. I mean, it was deliberately provocative, wasn't it?
Well, deliberately provocative, but an interesting side point is that Emmanuel Macron, President of France, said Europe is dead a few years ago. And he didn't necessarily face a backlash for saying that. It's something that a lot of European leaders occasionally acknowledge. It hurts more when it comes from an American leadership. And I do think you've got this mixture of actually the national security strategy document, if you read the whole thing, was careful, it was thoughtful. It's written by this guy, Michael Anton, who's a sort of brilliant mind, rather unusual mind, but a brilliant mind, who's now leaving the administration. And if you compare that to Trump's interviews, where he does seem to be being a bit more rogue than usual, and that's saying something by Trump standards, he seems to be firing off in all directions. I think the hostility from Trump is over Ukraine at the moment. It's his frustration that the European leaders are stopping him achieving peace in Ukraine. Now, there may be very good reasons why the Europeans are doing that, but that's the dimension, that's the real tension there at the moment. The kind of broader strategy stuff I could think would probably be brushed over if it wasn't for the anger that some people in the Trump administration feel, including Trump himself, about Ukraine and European leaders seemingly blocking his attempts to achieve peace.
Thanks, Freddy. Rina, let's talk about migration. Trump points out that Europe is heading into civilizational erasure, is the phrase that was used. Has he seen your borders lately?
Well, look, the thing about migration is understanding why Trump is really talking about it as part of his broader worldview. He sees Europe's struggles with migration and leadership as real validation for his America First agenda. You know, he's dismissing allies as burdensome rather than strategic partners. And the data really shows that his timing aligns with Europe's ongoing debate. With 29 million foreign residents in the EU as of 2025, that's per recent reports. That allows him to frame it as a cautionary tale for U.S. policy. But when Trump talks about decay, what he's doing is squarely blaming migration policies, and he's warning of civilizational erasure and claiming that Europe could become majority non-European. That's a nod to great replacement theories that really resonate with his anti-immigration stance. So I think his beef, President Trump's beef with London Mayor Sadiq Khan also should be highlighted here. It's personal and it's symbolic. Trump has really long attacked Khan as emblematic of of failed multiculturalism. And that is using him to argue that progressive policies here within the United States lead to urban decline and to security lapses.
But Rina, we could point out that Sadiq Khan has won back-to-back victories, something Trump has never achieved. He's a very popular, hard-working guy who cares deeply about London and its people. And whether Trump likes it or not, he's not going anywhere.
Right. But Trump loves the framing of making Europe seem like it has weak leaders all around. I mean, look, politically personalizing his attacks helps him position himself as a strongman alternative. And he continues to do that while exposing rifts in NATO, where only 11 of 32 members meet the 2% defense spending target as of 2025. It's not, again, about one particular figure, but it's always about these broad brush insults that help erode the trust. And without naming specifics, sometimes it still really fuels the populist narratives across Europe. And that potentially weakens centrist governments, which is something that Trump benefits from domestically and internationally.
Thanks, Rina. Philipp, to you, in some respects, do you think President Trump is doing the European Union a favor here? As we head into 2026, maybe people thinking, you know, there are some problems in Europe, but if we pull together, we can fix them.
Well, yes, I guess to a certain extent, you're right. I mean, Trump, with his antagonistic stance, clearly sends a signal that Europe needs to pull together more, and Europe finds itself in a quite delicate situation also with Russia, of course. So it's Trump on top of that, and the threat of an end to the American military support really show Europe that now is the time to really get the act together, move on together forward. That means further integration when it comes to the economy, to integrate the single market more. That would make them more independent also from American tariffs and economic warfare, and also invest together more in defense, integrate their in defense industries, and also integrate their decision-making processes, because we see a lot of times, Europe is moving very slowly. And when it comes to foreign policy in nowadays world, you need to move quick. And I think if Europe wants to play with the big players like China and US and Russia in hard politics, you need to have a capacity to react quickly. And for that, I think there needs to be, less vetoes possible in the European Council, for example.
Andras, I see in this strategy policy from the United States, they've identified 4 countries who they want to leave the European Union: Hungary, Italy, Poland, and Austria. Talk to me about your country. Is there any prospect of Hungary leaving the EU?
We want to make Europe great again. We want to take over the majority at European level. We have the Alliance of Patriots for Europe since last year. We're growing in popularity in the different member states, and we want to fix Europe. That's the way to do it. We cannot move Europe. We cannot get rid of Europe or anything like that, and we don't want to. Europeans like the idea all across, not only in Hungary, but in other countries, that we work together for prosperity and freedom and peace in Europe. Unfortunately, the leadership is not doing that right now. As someone already just said, EU elites always take any kind of opportunity to strengthen the federalist idea in Europe. Whatever the crisis is, whatever the challenge is, their policy is, oh, we need more Europe. We need more competencies at European level instead of the national level. And that's the dead-end street we've been going down for many years now. We have a European People's Party and socialist, liberal, green coalition running Europe, and they're running Europe into the ground. And that's why we're saying we need to challenge this. We need to challenge the status quo. We need to challenge these bad policies. We need to fix the border crisis. We need to fix the economic crisis. We need to fix high energy prices. And we need to restore European prosperity. And by the way, this is exactly what is in the national security strategy. It says they are worried about Europe. They cite the criticism, and at the same time, they say they are worried and they want to partner. They want strong European partners. Unfortunately, even those who understand this criticism, they will instead use it against the United States and to impose further centralized power at European level.
So, Andras, you didn't answer my question. Will Hungary leave the European Union?
We have absolutely no intention of leaving. We want to make Europe great again, and we make that. We make Europe great again by taking over the majority in the different member states and also at European level.
And so you're confident that that is going to happen? You've got the support and the numbers?
It's already happening in certain policy areas. When you look at the European Parliament, We've just adopted a few weeks ago the first, what we call the omnibus regulation, which is easing regulations on businesses. We are now looking into more a tougher line on migration policy. We have cooperation there as well with the European People's Party, the Conservatives, Patriots, the Sovereignists. So I think we will have, by the end of this cycle in the European Parliament, a right-wing, more conservative, more patriotic coalition, which will put a limit on the power in Brussels and really take the sovereignty of member states more seriously.
Thank you, Andras. Freddie, just come in on that, the whole issue of leaving Europe, these countries. These are big countries, Hungary, Italy, Poland, Austria.
Yeah.
I can't see it happening, can you?
Well, not at the moment, no. And I think what Andras says is fascinating, but it reminds me a little bit of the Conservative Party in the decades leading up to Brexit.
Yeah.
Always saying, we want to make Europe work. We're not against being in Europe. We can make Europe work. We can make it work. But they found there was such intransigence in Brussels that eventually, we had Brexit. I think that the bigger geopolitical picture is changing now. Very dramatically. And I think 2025, not just because of this national security strategy document, but because of the way Trump has been maneuvering on the world stage. The bigger picture is that Europe is clearly losing relevance in geopolitics, the world stage. Will that trigger some sort of reformation within the European Union? We have to wait and see, but it's one of the key questions for the future for Europe. Certainly.
Thank you, Freddie. Rina, just come in on that. Is Europe losing relevance then when you're in Washington, D.C.? Do they care about us that much or not?
Look, speaking of the future, I think Europe ought to expect more antagonism from this Trump administration. His pattern of tariffs, NATO criticism, and isolationism really suggests escalating tensions in the new year, especially on trade and defense. That's really tough. So I think, look, Trump's meddling in EU affairs, cheering potential exits by Hungary, Italy, Poland, and Austria. Sure, it oversteps boundaries and it treats the bloc as a rival rather than an ally, which is not America's place to dictate.
Philipp, it strikes me that European leaders are going to have a lot to digest Christmas. They're going to have time on their hands, and all of the rhetoric coming from Trump's administration, they will clearly have a lot on their plate to chew over this Christmas.
Sure, they will have to do that, but I think before Christmas comes, there's still the European Council, and I think there are important decisions to make now. And that is, on the one hand, the Mercosur deal, where Europe has the chance to diversify from trade with China and the United States and build a common trade area with South American countries, which would make it much more independent. Then there is the vote on the Russian assets, where if Europe would go ahead and take these assets and give them to Ukraine, they would have a huge bargaining chip in the negotiations with Russia. And it would be able to really put itself as a geopolitical player in these negotiations. So I think before Christmas comes, there's a lot to chew on for European policymakers, and when the next year starts, I believe it should be full steam ahead, especially also on the integration. I think to say that European nations alone can make it in this world is a fallacy. We need to move on together. There is no way that a country even as big as Germany can play a big role nowadays with such heavyweights like China and the US. So I think it's absolutely vital that there is more cooperation, more integration, more movement forward together.
Andras, final point to you. Is the Hungarian model the one that Europe should be looking to? Tough on migration, family first, building a strong economy, and having a strong right-wing leader like Orban. That's clearly what you would like to see the future of Europe as.
No, Europe has to do more. Europe has to actually recover. It has to have a clear vision for where it wants to be in 2030 and 2050. What is its place in the global affairs? Because currently we have weak leaders in the big member states. We have weak leaders leading the European institutions. Europe has a lot of its on its hand. We need to do our homework, and first and foremost, we need to restore peace in Europe. European leaders need to stop sabotaging the peace negotiations between the US and Russia. We need to be realistic about what's going on there. We need to restore peace. And then we can start thinking about all of the other crises we're facing, whether it's energy, it's inflation, it's stagnation, it's a living crisis, it's overregulation, it's migration. We have a lot on our plate. We need to fix these. Unfortunately, we need a big change currently in Europe, in most of the member states, to get there.
Thanks, Andras. Freddie, just briefly, if Trump wanted to sharpen European minds, he has certainly done that.
Yes. I mean, I think one way or the other. Either it'll engender a sort of spirit of cooperation, which at the moment looks very unlikely, or you'll have a sort of Trump-lash effect, which is what we saw in Canada with the election of Mark Carney in Canada, which is Trump so irritates the populaces of Europe that they will turn more European as a result. I don't think that's going to happen. I think at the moment things are so bad in Europe, or a lot of the peoples of Europe feel that things are so bad that they're actually more sympathetic to Trump than their leaders are.
And that's exactly what he wanted. Freddie, thank you. Rina, Philipp, and Andras as well. Thank you all so much. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye, and thank you for watching.